Hi, guys. I'm Elin Hilderbrand, and I am joined tonight by Ellie Eaton, who is the author of my first Literati book club pick, The Divines. I am so excited about this book. And one of the things that I want to do every month for my book club is to have a chat with the author. And Ellie was kind enough to join us from England, and we can basically just sit back and listen to her accent, and we will all be so happy.
It's raining, so I have equality England already.
We would be upset if it wasn't raining, because that's how Americans, of course, think about Great Britain. It's always raining. So Ellie, I want to start by talking about the Divines. Lots to talk about, and then I want to sort of move into you as a writer. This is your first book?
It is. I mean, I feel like when any writer is asked that question, they're sort of lying. I mean, unless you're really lucky. But there are other books hidden away in drawers, yeah. But yeah, it was the first one, I think, that I had that feeling of that lift-off moment from the tarmac. When you're writing it and you're like, oh yeah, this is off now. Like, I'm going. So yeah, it's my debut.
Okay, I'm so excited by that. Okay, so The Divines is about a girl/woman named Josephine. The narrative is told in two parts. There's Josephine as an adult looking back at her teenage self, and then there's Jo, who is her high school persona, and we sort of switch back and forth. She goes to a very posh, I'm going to use posh as a very British word, I think, private boarding school, and at the beginning of the novel, she has an encounter with what I'm going to call a townie. So one of the things that attracted me to this book is that, like, I live on Nantucket, and on Nantucket, it's a summer resort. So there's definitely a dichotomy between the people who live here year round, such as myself and my children, and then the people who come for the summer. So it's like locals and summer people, and there's a little bit of tension. And I felt that very same tension in this book between the girls who go to the Divine and the people who live in the town. So can you just give us like a snapshot about the book?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the book moves between these two timelines. So there's contemporary LA, and then there's Britain in the 90s. And Josephine, my narrator, has left school 15 years ago and really never looked back. And she's on her honeymoon and makes this impromptu decision to like revisit the campus where she'd gone to school. And it's that moment that dredges up memories of the friendship she made at school, but also this very violent act that had really just exploded her life as she knew it. And so the book, in a way, is a traditional coming of age novel, but it centers very much on teenagers, teenage sexuality, but memory plays this really fundamental part in the story about how memory, or we as humans, have a very strange relationship with our younger years, and how memory may be warped over time, or there are certain things that we hide from ourselves even. So yeah, it's a book that's a lot about the fallibility of memory, as well as how terrifying teenage girls can be.
Right. So one of the things that I found myself drawn to were, so our main character basically strikes up a friendship with this girl named Lauren, who is a townie, and she goes to the public high school, and she has an older brother and sort of a strange family life, which Josephine is sort of slowly introduced to. And this friendship with this town person causes a disruption in her school life. Absolutely. And she's ostracized, essentially, over the course of the book by her regular friends, which is so excruciating to read about, and yet speaks to your talent as a writer. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of friendship dynamic?
So I have lived outside of Britain now for over 10 years. And one of the things about having some distance from the country that you come from is that you notice the quirks and oddities that you probably wouldn't notice if you were still in it. And the British class system is just, it's baffling. I mean, and it's stranger the further away. I think there's this view on television of it being quite quaint and funny, or it's Downton Abbey, or there's a show called Keeping Up Appearances that used to be on TV that plays with these class divides. But actually, the reality is that the country is like increasingly run by this very elite group of people who've been to schools like the Devines. And also growing up, I read a lot of those boarding school novels, like Enid Blyton. I mean, even Harry Potter in a way, like they're very the reality of the life of these like privileged little bubbles is much more real than the outside gate. And I wanted to like look at that world and the kind of formula, I suppose, of a boarding school novel and say like, well, what about the people they shut out? Because that's really, they're as important as the people that are kept inside these very precious bubbles. And what happens if you have an outsider like Lauren and Jerry, actually, to a certain extent, who is kind of, like middle class, but not accepted at all, because she's not one of these upper class girls where, that idea of pedigree, I suppose, comes into play here. And so Lauren is, working class and proud, comes from this very noisy, quite raucous family. The Devines come from this very upper class world. And I wanted to say, well, there's this image, I suppose, of these girls being very rarefied, and really the opposite true. Like Lauren is the very humane, smart, caring, interested character of the book, and the Devines are just like barbaric. I mean, they're so cruel to each other. They literally, I mean, I think we're allowed spoilers. I mean, they tear the school apart. Right. And I think what I wanted to look at was like the consequences. Like, what are the consequences for those two characters? If Lauren had rampaged through the town or the school, she probably would have had a criminal record.
Sure.
But the Devines, because of the nature of how wealth and this kind of invisible empire that is the upper classes in Britain works, meant that they're kind of immune. They can just move on to their new lives and reinvent themselves, and they'll be like the wives of CEOs and prime ministers, and without, I think, because this is the 90s, I don't think they had careers for themselves. But like Lauren, you just don't know how she'll be able to escape the town.
Right, exactly. And speaking of, there's a lot of like sort of repressed sexuality in the school because it's a girls' school. Their interactions with boys are very unnatural. And so Josephine gets involved with Lauren's older brother, which is, again, so exquisitely painful. I had said that I wanted to do spoilers, but now I'm thinking like, I really don't want to ruin this for anybody who hasn't read the book. So I'm not going to say what happens, but it is so exquisitely painful, just every bit. So that Josephine is going through sort of the dual battles of like dealing with her horrible, awful friends at school, right? And trying to manage them vis-a-vis Lauren. And then also, having this situation with Lauren's older brother, which is just like, oh my God, it's cringe. It's so cringeworthy and upsetting. And
I mean, I think everyone's had that feeling, and it's particularly painful at that age where you just the obsessive nature of actually both friendship, I think, as well as romantic interest. And it doesn't matter if you're straight or you're not straight, because it's anyone that you kind of obsess over. It's so raw at that age and so tender and so exposed and rejection. There's a moment where she's just sitting alone at a bus stop or a bench, and she's daydreaming about him, like in this kind of streetcar named Josiah Way, running through the streets calling her name, and you just think, oh no, no. But yeah, the heartbreak. I think I really wanted to write a book that took teenagers seriously in a way, or like, I think there's this sensation, particularly on television, of making that age group feel very shiny or plastic or unreal. And you have the kind of tropes of the kind of moody goth, or the like, I guess you have the cheerleader in America. But I kind of wanted to look at it with a degree of complexity that I hadn't really seen much on TV, and sort of say, this isn't a stepping stone to like the next stage in your life. Like, it's as real as any age group, I think, and not to be trivialized and to be taken seriously, I thought.
Right. And I mean, I think that's what's very, very, it's a very adult book. I mean, it's an extremely adult book because even though it deals with high school and I find even, I'm 51 and I find writing about that age group so interesting because you're just trying to figure everything out and trying to find yourself. And that was one of the things that just drew me to this book is it like evokes the things in your past that are so meaningful and that, and it does really it's a very complex look, I think, at that age. And so you did a fantastic job. And so we have at the school, there's a character named Jerry. She's an ice skater.
Yes.
She's constantly at practice. She has this questionable relationship with her coach. It is so beautifully done. Something happens with Jerry at the end, which is quite tragic and awful. And then, and I wish I could talk more about it, but I really feel like I'm not going to ruin the book for them. But where did the character of Jerry come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wanted her to be different from the Divines, of the bulk of the Divines, and that she was part of their world, yet not allowed to be part of that world. I wanted to create that sense of belonging that we all have when they're at that age. We just want to be part of the group. And Jerry actually is quite, she's very angry. She kind of projects this aura as if she doesn't want to belong. Right. And then you slowly see as she becomes, for a moment, friendly with Joe, that actually that's probably all that she's ever wanted, is to be accepted, as all teenagers are at that age. You want to be part of something. And I felt like, it was important to me not to make her into a kind of martyr as well. Like I wanted her to be quite tricky and not straight down the line. And girls are really, really good at covering up things and lying and keeping secrets for all sorts of reasons. And I wanted her to have this quite hard little nut that she was carrying around with her. And also a little bit when I started writing the novel and getting into it, I did that creepy thing where you start thinking about people you went to school with. And a little bit like the narrator, I had left school and just felt this immense sense of relief. I'm not someone that has best friends from that. All my best friends are from university onwards. So I had no connection really with the school. And my school had also shut down. So physically.
Okay. Like
this anymore. And I came across this Instagram post from this girl at school who was terrifying. I mean, legitimately terrifying. She could look at you and raise an eyebrow and you just be like, just filled with dread. She's the kind of person I'd jump, like if I saw her now, I'd jump behind a pillar, Yeah. But she did this really extraordinary post which talked about what had gone on in her teenage years, as she'd had like a very fractured family life and some truly sad things that happened to her. And she talked about the school that I'd gone to and said, it was this completely safe space for me where I met the best friends I'll ever meet. And it was the happiest days of my life. And it was just like, she was like, I'm so glad to be part of that community. And it was so different to my experience of her, which was that she was so cruel and so unpleasant. And it made me really question whose version was true. Like how could the two versions of her, had she kind of adjusted and tweaked her memories to make her feel better about who she was, or had I actually completely misread the situation, and was it me who was wrong? So that played a little bit into Jerry. I was just like, our understanding of people is so blinkered, I think, at that age, and I think I wanted Jerry in a way to be this quite misunderstood human being.
Right. And I think she definitely is. And then the ending. So, I mean, that story about your school friend is totally fascinating. And I feel like...
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. So that story about your school friend really, I think, fits and informs the novel, and especially the ending. So the ending, I mean, I'm a stickler for endings because I'm always like, can they nail the land? Is the author going to be able to nail the landing? Is it all going to come together? And possibly more than any other book I have read this year, the last pages of The Divines are so satisfying. So
thank you.
And I probably like screamed or shrieked at the end, like, yes. Yes, good job.
And I have no idea how you've written so many endings. I find them terrifying.
I know. I mean, you did such a phenomenal job. Anyway, all right. So I want to shift gears a little bit, and sort of ask, which is questions that I get asked also. How you got started, how you got this published, what the publishing. I mean, I know it's only your first book, but what the experience of the publishing of this book was.
Yeah, I mean, I had done my, I guess what you call an MFA in England at the University of London, and really found my sort of kindred writers there and a group of people. But and I'd worked in a prison as a writer in resident, and all that time I'd been writing books. But when we moved to America, I was in this position where I still had a UK agent, and I had a small child, and I was making telephone calls at like 4 a.m. under the cake cupboard so as not to wake her, and it was a bit silly. And really, this book was born of that period of being kind of almost between agents, and I was a relatively new mother. I think my daughter was a year old, and there was a lot of kind of like fluffy, soft talk around motherhood that was like, baby brain and this very gentle. And I was having the opposite experience in that I had never felt sharper in a way, because I suddenly was like, if I want to continue to write, we didn't have money for childcare, and I was like, I'm going to have to get up 5:30 in the morning. I know you have a similar early morning ritual, and I was like, I'm just going to, when she naps, I write. And I kind of had that kind of ferocity of like cutting out anything from my life that felt like it was getting in the way of being a parent and being a writer in my own life. And so, and also politically in the world, things were, Boris Johnson was sort of appearing on, Brexit was happening. There was stuff in America that made me think about being like a woman in the world and what that meant, and raising a daughter. And I think all those ideas and my kind of anger, I think, frustration at not having landed a book deal yet, having written a couple of books and just feeling like I'm just going to write a book and I'm so mad at it, and it just poured out at me and the initial draft was very, very fast. And then I was lucky enough to find my incredible agent, Julia, who actually, interestingly, I think also comes from Nantucket, and she connected. I know, she comes from, she connected in the same way. She was like, I'm a townie. She was like, I'm a townie. Well, I was a townie. Yeah. So she understood that idea of the kind of crown and the gown, kind of like the idea of, insiders and outsiders. So yeah, and then the book went out, and I think 2-3 weeks later, I think I was chatting to my now editor, Liz, who's the team at William Morrow have just been brilliant, just had such a great group of people working on the book. So yeah, it took me a while. I mean, I think a lot of writers come out of MFAs just thinking, it will just happen because I've done it. And actually the road getting published is so long and winding, I think, for so many people.
Absolutely. What I appreciate about what you just said is the fact that after you had your daughter, that you were really, that you used ferocity. And the thing is that is how also I have gotten where I am, is you have to be disciplined. If you are not disciplined and you do not cut out the things that are not work and parenting, at least for a little while, you will not get it done. And I went to the University of Iowa, which is this fancy MFA, and so few people there were so many talented people there. Yeah. And so few have, gotten to where I am because they just, it really comes down to being a work ethic. But I mean, I was not the most talented person at Iowa by a long shot. It was that I could finish, and that was what was the difference.
And that kind of thick skin, and like rejections are just part and parcel. And I think in every time I've had a book that hasn't sold, I've had my moment of feeling really sorry for myself. I've wallowed, but then there's something that makes you get up and think, God damn it, I'm going to just do it. I'm just going to keep going. There's something that drives you to do it. But yeah, for me, I wish I was one of those people that could drift around, with ideas in my head but I'm really, I'm such a creature of habit. I eat the same thing every single day. I had a bit of a panic attack. No, honestly, I'm mad. I make it all the night before, and I get up and I wear the same little outfit every day because I just don't want to have to make any decisions. I think if I remove any making of decisions from my life, I'm like, then my head will stay clear, and I can just be in this dream state as I roll out of bed to my desk. And then the company that made my crackers that I eat every day went bust. Which was,
oh dear.
I know, it was a bit of a disaster. But anyway, yeah, I'm very, very ritualistic, which is both brilliant, but also can be a little bit limiting. If you
Right. No, I realize that. How many books did you write before The Divines, would you say?
I'd say 2, and then one that was kind of the seed of The Divines, but was very different. It was I think it didn't really reach far enough into Josephine's adult self. It was quite limited from that point of view. So a lot of work that I did on it actually with my editor was fleshing out the contemporary sections, because I think part of the way the book works is to show how your education and the family you're born into has your impact on the rest of your life. And
right.
But yeah, there's definitely two in the drawer that you think, oh well, I'll get them out one day and they'll just be ready to go, and then you sort of, I think, oh, nope.
Right. No, I know. I mean, I had a novel that never saw the light of day. It's gone. I don't even know where. I mean, it's just gone. But I feel like it was important because it's all a process of sort of, but I want anyone watching, I hope, who wants to be a writer, that I hope they've listened to that this truly was like Ellie's third-ish book that made it, but you kept going and you didn't give up. And that's more of like the ferocity and the discipline and just being like, it's, I will get there.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get worse. I think that's the only thing about writing is, well, hopefully not, that you do it. That's book 2 is yet to come. So let's see what happens. In theory, if you keep working that muscle, it's sort of like getting on your Peloton bike. You will get there. Hopefully. So yeah. And at the time it's hard when you're in that moment. I think it's hard speaking to writers that have just come out of their MFA to say this might be the situation for you, because you can't go into a book thinking that you might never see the light of day, because there's you want readers, you want people. The joy of being published is being able to feel like you can be in conversations like this. That's the really wonderful thing about being the other side of the publishing experience.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. But at the same time, I mean, I definitely think that the process is important. And I feel like people coming out of MFA programs, I mean, I did write a novel right out of MFA, but I mean, I didn't go to MFA right out of college. So, I mean, my professor at college said, you have to go out in the world and live. And so my number one piece of advice for people who want to be a writer is you have to have some experiences, get a job, do something different.
Otherwise,
what do you write about? Exactly. Unless, I mean, you had a really traumatic upbringing, but I mean, and drama and dramatize and write scenes. And I mean, that's the other thing is I feel like a lot of beginning writers get stuck in sort of expository, and they need to have drama, scene, which you do so beautifully. Okay, so I'm going to ask 2 more questions. The first question is, what are you working on now? I'm so excited.
Oh, I know. It's funny, actually. I suppose I'm thinking a lot about things that are taboo, like female anger. One thing that's come out of this book is, I think it is what in English you'd call a Marmite book, which is a very strange breakfast condiment. Have you ever had Marmite?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's Marmite in that people love it or hate it. I think people, and particularly with Josephine, people extreme ways. There are certain readers who see Josephine and are like, oh, I recognise her. Like, I know her, that woman, that those early stages of motherhood I recognise, or that teenage experience, I was that girl, right? And other people find her, a word that I hate, unlikable. So I became really interested in this idea of unlikability and what it means to be like an unlikable woman. And at the moment, I'm exploring a book that's set partly in Florida and partly is sort of a road trip book, I suppose, about women. And I guess how women frame themselves, female power, female agency, women in the driving seat, I suppose. I don't know. I find it so hard to talk about my books before I've written them.
I mean, who doesn't want? I mean, you're presently writing it. Yes.
Yeah, I am. I found I'm just in awe of you, because you you can just write anywhere. It feels like I've got 3 kids. I've got to be able to write anywhere. So I'm trying to be less controlling about that. In COVID times, it was quite hard with California schools just completely shut down. So it was a little bit claustrophobic and not the most creative of times, as I think a lot of writers have felt. But actually, I have my window set up just in this room here, and I look across like a cricket field in the rain, and I'm just trying to get up every morning in England, beat the jet lag, and just try to be a bit more free about it. But yeah, I'm getting there.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's hard. It took a long time for me to realize. I mean, also, and I was just on these crazy deadlines to feel like, okay, I don't have the luxury. I do have certain rituals, but they like really vary. Yeah. But that I have, I don't have the luxury to wait until all the stars align. Like you have to get it done. But I think that a female road trip novel sounds incredible. Like, do we have any really good female road trip novels? I don't think so. I mean, I can't, none come to mind. And that sounds awesome. Okay. So I want to end on this question because this is a book group. I want to ask you about your reading life. So can you talk a little bit about how you read, what you read, if you have anything to recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky in that when COVID kicked off, Liv Stratman, who used to work, I think, at Books and Magic in New York, has just published a fantastic book called Cheat Day. Realized that actually doing this all in COVID times was really, really lonely. And so she set up this incredible Slack group, and we can moan about the same things, and we can cheer each other on, and we can ask all the awkward questions you can't ask anyone else. It's very good. But I've been reading a lot of the books of the writers that are in that group. So some of them haven't come out. But so I think that's one that's coming up.
Oh.
I know. I think it comes out actually the end of the year or the beginning of next. The School for Good Mothers. And then I think I've been trying to read books that have come out at the same time as my book came out. Milk, Blood, Heat was a collection of short stories. Typically when I'm writing, I have a short story collection to hand, and halfway through, like when my brain starts to get a bit tired and frazzled, or if I feel like I'm a bit blocked, I'll often just have like a coffee break and I'll sit with some short stories and just like feel like it's a bit of a palate cleanser. I don't know, it helps me like shake my head loose a little bit sometimes, and then I get back to work. So yeah, Milk, Blood, Heat was a really that year. Yeah, that's been good.
And do you find, I'm so curious, like do you find that you tend to read more British authors or more American authors?
I've always loved American literature. It's part of the reason for this country. Yeah, I just, I found when I was introduced to American writing, this kind of like space and freedom and robustness. I feel just like they're ballsier books in America. So I'm going to get hate mail from British writers. I love actually saying that. I've read some really fantastic British writers this year. There's a book that I was reading this week called Asylum Road, which is just mind-blowing. But yeah, I just felt, I guess it was what made me want to be a writer. I think I just loved great American novels. And it was part of the dream we had of moving to America. It all came from that. So, and I was for 3 months a resident in Jack Kerouac's house in Orlando. So which is great. Yeah. Brilliant. You used to get paid in vouchers for like a lobster restaurant, which I thought was amazing. And then they stopped doing that, and you just got a voucher for your local grocery store. But it was 3 months of being in his house where he wrote Dharma Bums and doing nothing but writing and sweating. Lots of sweating.
Lots of sweating. Okay, no, I see. That's so great. And then of course now my wheels are spinning, and I'm like, okay, hence the female road trip novels. Yeah. If you've been living in Kerouac's house, I'm like, okay, that is so interesting. Well, thank you, Ellie. I want to say to everybody, the book is The Divines. It was my very inaugural pick, my first pick for my Beach and Beyond book group. You will not be disappointed. This book is fantastic. The ending is absolutely dynamite. The writer is Ellie Eaton. It is her first novel. I am so delighted to be able to bring it to you. And thank you, Ellie.
And massive congratulations. Wrong shoulder, but so many congratulations. It's there. I'm telling you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, guys.